Hi, this is Vicki with Crafting for Fun. Today I'm excited to share with you how to make an inlaid leaf border design card. This card was quick and easy to make, and I think it really has a dramatic effect. The first layer is cut using a border die, this element here, and then the leaves are actually set down into the border die, and so there is a deep inset, and that is the inlaid effect that we're going for. And I hope that you can see the tremendous dimension that border effect gives you. And then the inside is simply just decorated with some extra leaves. So this is really a quick and easy card to put together, and it's fun to make and fun to give. So let me get my things set up and I'll show you exactly what you need to make a card like this. To create today's project, you'll need the following items. You'll need a piece of cardstock for your base card that measures 8 1/2 inches by 5 1/2 inches, and I have scored mine at 4 1/4 inches in the center. You'll need a piece of vanilla color cardstock to create the layer for the front of your card. This piece measures 3 1/2 inches by 5 1/2 inches. And then I'm using a piece of vanilla color cardstock that measures, 5 inches by 3 3/4 inches to create a liner for the inside of my card, since my card base is a dark color. I'm going to be using a leaf border die. This is by Poppy Dies, or by Poppy Stamps, I'm sorry. But if you don't have a die similar to this, you could create the same effect using either a leaf punch or like a leaf framelit. So whatever you have, you can experiment with that. And then to give my leaves some added texture, I'm going to be using this Doris embossing folder, and it looks like crackled paint or crunched up leaves in this case. And I really like the effect that this embossing folder gives. I have used some of my scraps from previous cards. I used soft suede, pear pizzazz, cherry cobbler, and crushed curry papers to cut some additional leaves that I'm going to be using on my card. So these are the colors that I'll use for my leaves. And I'm going to be using Mossy Meadow ink, which matches my card base, and a sentiment stamp that says "Get Well Soon." In addition to that, you'll need a big shot or some kind of a cutting and embossing machine to cut your dies and create your texture with. You'll need some pop dots, and I'm going to be using 2 different sizes of pop dots only because that's what I happen to have. You could certainly cut down whatever size pop dots you might have in your possession. And I'm going to be using double-sided tape. And that's really all that I'll need in order to create today's card. So let me get set up and I'll show you how I made this card. The very first thing you'll want to do when you make this card is to stamp that 3 1/2 by 5 1/2 inch layer piece, because if your stamping is crooked, this is the only opportunity you'll have in order to correct that problem. So I'm going to go ahead and ink my stamp, and oops, this stamp looks awfully juicy. Let me grab a piece of post-it note here and get some of that ink off. I guess it's not as inky as I thought. Okay, so I have a brand new stamp pad that I'm working with, and I am going to stamp on, in this case I'm going to stamp on the right hand side, which means that I'll be creating my border along the left hand side. And that doesn't look entirely straight to me. It looks like it's going downhill a little bit. So I'm actually going to turn my paper over and I'm going to try again. Bet you've never done that at home, huh? So I'm going to do the same stamp there, and that looks much better to me. Okay, so I've got my Get Well Soon sentiment stamped on my paper, and now what I want to do is I want to grab my die. I'm going to actually be bringing in my Big Shot machine in a moment to cut it, but I want to work a little bit on placement. So I'm going to lay my border die along the edge of my paper, and in this case I can take all the time that I need to work on positioning. I can flip it around and kind of see which position I like it better in. I think I like it better like that. So I'm going to grab my Big Shot machine and I'm actually going to cut this layer. Now while I'm cutting, if I were cutting this at home, I would actually go ahead at this time when I cut my border, I would also go ahead and use the same die to cut some additional leaves. And that's what I've done. I have some leaves here from previous projects, so I have those already cut. And then I'm going to go ahead while I have my Big Shot machine out and add some additional texture. But first, let's cut the border on this. And then at home, you can cut your leaves. And I'll show you how to do that. So let me grab my Big Shot and I'll be right back. Okay, I have my Big Shot machine set up here. And I actually am using a magnetic platform. That's this white thing on the bottom. And then on top of that, I have a precision base plate. That actually helps me to get better cuts when I have very, very detailed dies. If you don't happen to have that, you can just use your multi-purpose platform just like you always do. If you are using a precision base plate, it will take the place of your bottom clear acrylic cutting pad. So you will only need to add one acrylic cutting pad when you're cutting out the image. So I'm going to go ahead and position my die here. And I have it just the way I want it. And I'm going to go ahead and put my top clear acrylic plate on and feed that through my embossing machine. And I actually am going to run it through and then I'm going to run it back just to make sure I get a very good cut. Now, you will see that this makes a very, very good cut, but it's very, very detailed. So you'll want to take your time when you're removing the die from your paper, because you've got a lot of little fine areas and you don't want to tear anything. Now, like I said, at home, if you don't have a border die like this, you could use a punch or another leaf-shaped thinlet die. You just want to vary the position of your leaves so that they're not all facing the same direction. So I'm finished with my die there. And now I'm going to grab my precision base plate, because I do want to emboss my leaves using that embossing folder. So I'm going to open my multi-purpose platform to tab 1. I'm going to put down my bottom embossing pad. And I want to bring my stamped image back, because one thing I did discover when I made this card the very first time was that it is important to lay your leaves inside of your embossing folder. I'm just going to open my embossing folder up here. It's important to lay them inside of the embossing folder in the same orientation that they're going to be on your finished card. That way you don't have some that are embossed on the front and some that are debossed on the front. So I'm going to grab leaves. I'm going to do a green one at the top, and it needs to go with the stem in that direction. I'm going to grab a brown one next, and it also needs to go with the stem in that direction. I'm going to do a red one next, and the stem goes in the opposite direction, and then a yellow one last. And then I'm going to throw in a couple of extra leaves that I'm going to use to decorate the inside of the card. I'll say a green one and a yellow one. And those, the orientation doesn't matter. So the green on top, yellow on the bottom. I'm going to put that there on my on my platform. I'm going to put another plate on top and I'm going to roll it through. And back. Now let me get rid of my Big Shot and I'll show you what we have here. When you open up this embossing folder, you'll find that the leaves have transferred to the top. And so I'll need to remember that my green one is on top, followed by my brown one, then my red one, and my yellow one, and then these two extras are for the inside of the card. So it's important to lay them out so that you can remember which ones you emboss to go in which direction. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this layer that is for the front of my card and I'm going to turn it over. And this is where you need to apply your pop dots. You'll want to apply a very, very generous amount of pop dots, and you'll want to get them very close to your leaf image, but not on, not where it would show on the front of the card, so that it can definitely hold that shape up. This is key to getting that really pretty inlaid look. It will make for a nice deep well for the leaves to sit in. So, and make sure you get at each corner that you get one. So I'm going to use the tiny, tiny pieces of pop dots over here. And then like I said, I have some larger ones as well. There are areas where I don't need them to be small, and so I'm going to use my larger ones there. Again, I'm going to make sure I get one at each corner and in the middle. And I don't want to have any sagging and bagging, so I've put a very, very generous amount. So now I'm going to go ahead and remove all those liners. And that does take a few seconds. I really, really like this effect. It's a very, very simple card with a very dramatic look if you get the inlay to be very deep and neat. So, okay. So I'm going to set that layer aside, and I'm going to grab my base card, and I'm going to fold it in half. This is where you would use a bone folder to burnish the edges. And then I'm going to take my layer, and you want your edges to line up exactly. So you want about the same amount of distance on both sides. And see if I can get that on there straight. There we go. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to start inlaying my leaves. My first one is going to be my green one. I'm going to turn it over on the debossed side. I'm going to add a little adhesive. Oops. And I've ripped my stem off, so I'm going to set that one aside, and I'm going to need to make another. I'm going to do my brown one. Now I'm going to lay it down and fit it in just like a puzzle piece. And I'm going to come back and work on getting all those little details pressed down in a moment. But right now I'm just laying it in like a puzzle piece. Then my red one. And it doesn't take a whole lot of adhesive on the back of these, just enough to hold them in place. I'm going to push the red one down using my fingernail, and I'll come back again, like I said, and make sure it's all tamped down nicely in a moment. Now my yellow one. And I'm going to actually create another green leaf to go up in the top because I messed my first one up. So let me do that, and I'll be right back to show you how to finish this card. Okay, I'm back, and I've created another green leaf, and that just goes to show you how delicate that little stem is, and you want to be very, very careful so you don't pull anything apart. I'm going to put some adhesive on the back of it and fit it in just like a puzzle piece. Now here's where the magic happens. I want to take something sharp, like either the edge of my scissors or a paper piercer or something of that nature, and I want to go ahead and make sure that all of my little parts are pushed down very well. And you should actually be able to slide it underneath the edge. I'm going to bring this closer so you can see. You should actually be able to slide it underneath the edge between that vanilla layer and your leaf image, all the way around. And these little stems, they're very tiny, and you can just use your fingernail to actually poke them down in the well where they go. Oops. Have one that's being a little obstinate. Another thing that works well to do that with is the blade of your paper snips. If you need to, you can always, this little leaf wants to be obstinate, and so I can always take and put a little tiny bit of adhesive on that and go ahead and push it down, and it will stick in place. And again, I can now run my paper piercer all around the edge of that. So I'm going to show you how deeply inlaid those leaves are. I hope you can see that detail. It's really quite stunning once you get it in the right position. So I'm going to open this card up, and I'm going to take the piece of cardstock that I cut for my liner, and I'm going to adhere that in place. I could add an interior sentiment if I wanted to. And then I'm just going to grab those 2 extra leaves that I made, and I usually take my scissors and pull the stem off of one of them. And I'm going to slightly overlap them. So I'm going to put one down, and then I'm going to take the other, and I'm going to slightly overlap them. There we go. So I have a decorative element on the inside of my card and my nice inlaid leaves on the outside of my card and my sentiment. A really, really easy card to make with a very stunning and dramatic effect. I hope you enjoyed today's project. If you have any questions, please email me at craftingforfun@gmail.com or check out my blog for other craft ideas. Hope to see you back here soon.